It's Christmas Eve, 1994. A man in a Santa suit falls off a roof and vanishes into thin air. Scott Calvin, a toy executive who doesn't even believe in Santa, becomes the new Santa Claus that night. Unwillingly and unwillingly. Everyone knows the Disney movie. The franchise spawned 2 sequels and a Disney Plus series. We've watched it dozens of times over the years. But that accident on the roof was staged from the very beginning. Scott Calvin was targeted, recruited, and legally trapped into becoming Santa.
What if I choose not to believe it?
And the proof has been sitting there for 30 years, buried in magical contracts and the testimony of immortal beings. What happened in 1994 was corporate headhunting disguised as Christmas magic. The Disney Plus series admitted Scott was part of an experiment. They framed it as a noble and necessary evolution for Christmas. Going back to 1994 with this knowledge, and the movie stops being a heartwarming family film and instead becomes a forensic crime scene. The series tells us exactly what happened, and the movie shows us how they pulled it off. Just look at the business card from the previous Santa. If something should happen to me, put on my suit. The reindeer will know what to do. That sounds like contingency planning language. Someone who knows they're about to be removed from power wrote that card. And we're about to find out why. Scott Calvin hears a noise on his roof. He goes outside and yells at the figure up there. The guy who waves back stumbles and slides down the roof to his death. Except there's no death. He simply disappears, turns into glitter. An empty suit remains. This official story collapses when you examine what the Disney Plus series revealed about previous Santas. They weren't human. They were ethereal beings, magical entities made of spirit and belief, not flesh and bone. When Scott meets his predecessors in the ELVES, he asks the obvious question.
I wondered about that. Am I ethereal?
Nope. You are a regular human man with many, many faults.
Each Santa was chosen to meet the challenges of their times. During my final years, technology was becoming the new magic.
The guy on Scott's roof was an immortal, magical being. He'd been doing this job for possibly centuries, delivering presents to billions of houses, traveling the entire globe in one night, navigating every conceivable roof imaginable. And we're supposed to believe he just slipped?
Wait a minute, but I'm here because of an accident. I saw you slip off the roof. You fell.
And when Scott confronts his predecessor about the fall, the guy laughs at him.
Oh, you think someone yelling, "Hey," really made me slip and fall? I'm Santa, baby. I have been on millions of roofs.
That is straight from the source. The fall was impossible. Ethereal Santas don't trip on ice like clumsy humans. They're sustained by magic, not biology. When they die, they dissolve into magical energy and return to the ELVES. This being had mastered the most dangerous delivery route in existence. A startled shout wouldn't end his career. Remember the ladder? The one that mysteriously appeared on the side of Scott's house? Charlie read the label out loud.
The Rose Such a Clatter Company.
The Rose Such a Clatter Company. It's a pun on A Rose Such a Clatter from A Visit from St. Nicholas. It's clever wordplay, except Scott never owned that ladder. It materialized out of nowhere, perfectly positioned to guide him up to the roof and into the sleigh. Magic creates whimsy and flying reindeer. It produces infinite toy bags and Christmas miracles. This ladder had corporate branding. That ladder didn't float down on a cloud of Christmas spirit. It appeared with a company logo printed on one of the ladder rungs. The name implies manufacturing, design decisions, workshop production. Someone at the North Pole built that ladder, etched that branding, and placed it in Scott's yard at the exact moment he'd need it. Let's call it exactly what it is: a stage prop. The ladder was planted, the fall was theater, and Scott Calvin was the mark. What should have happened when Santa died on that roof? Panic. The biggest night of the year is underway, and the literal embodiment of Christmas just collapsed on a suburban rooftop. You'd expect emergency protocols, retrieval teams, mourning rituals, something. But instead, nothing. When Scott arrives at the North Pole wearing the suit, Bernard, the head elf who's been around for almost 2,000 years, doesn't react at all. He doesn't ask what happened. He doesn't send anyone to investigate the death. He hands Scott a snow globe and starts the orientation process like this was the most normal Tuesday of his immortal life. And now compare that reaction to 2022, when Scott considers retirement in the Disney Plus series. The elves lose their minds. They cry, panic. They beg him not to leave. Betty breaks down in tears. The emotional contrast contrast is staggering. But in 1994, Bernard's energy reads less like grief and more like middle management dealing with a new hire who showed up late to orientation.
I'm Bernard. Nice to meet you, Santa.
Cool, you're here. Put this on. Let's get started. Bernard explains what Scott just agreed to by putting on the Santa suit.
Putting on the suit and entering the sleigh, the wearer waives any and all rights to any previous identity, real or implied, and fully accepts the duties and responsibilities of Santa Claus in perpetuity until such time that wearer becomes unable to do so by either accident or design.
But Scott didn't sign anything. He didn't negotiate terms. He didn't understand what was happening. He put on a coat because the previous Santa had vanished and he was cold and confused, trying to keep his kid from freaking out. That single action legally bound him to the North Pole forever. This is just entrapment. The elves weren't surprised or in panic because they'd been briefed on this. This was a planned transition, a carefully orchestrated succession event. They needed Scott to put on that suit before he understood the consequences, because once he knew the truth, he would have run. Any rational person would have. And this raises the question, why go through all this trouble? Why target Scott Calvin specifically? Why not just approach him at a shopping mall and offer him the job? For centuries, the North Pole ran on autopilot. Ethereal Santas did their ancient routine, magic sustained belief, and Christmas happened as usual. But by the late 20th century, that system was failing. Technology changed everything. Kids stopped writing letters. They started browsing websites. Belief declined. Magic weakened. The Ethereal Santas, disconnected from humanity and locked into centuries-old methods, couldn't really adapt to a world where Amazon could deliver packages faster than reindeer. The ELVES Santas admit this outright. When Scott asks him why they chose him, his predecessor explains.
I thought only a human could meet the new challenges. A special human.
They wanted a CEO, someone who understood modern business, logistics, and supply chains, someone who could compete in an era where instant gratification was replacing wonder. And who was Scott Calvin? A senior marketing executive at B&R Toys. He specialized in distribution systems. He pitched products to skeptical consumers. He understood market research, demographics, delivery windows. The man was literally in the business of making children happy with toys. He's the perfect candidate. One of the other predecessors drops another bombshell.
I was against this whole Scott experiment from the very beginning. Entrusting the fate of magic to human hands. Honestly, that sounded like the end of the world to me.
The Scott experiment. Those are the exact words they used. A calculated test. Recruit a human. Bind him to the job. See if he can save Christmas from obsolescence. They found Scott Calvin. They staged an accident on his roof. They planted a branded ladder to guide him up. They left a business card with binding legal language disguised as a friendly note. And when he put on the suit, they had him. Scott wasn't chosen by destiny. He was headhunted by an immortal bureaucracy desperate to stay relevant. And now we get to the final piece of evidence, the one that proves the 1994 fall was completely unnecessary. In the Disney Plus series, Scott discovers the Successes Clause, a provision in North Pole law that allows Santa to retire peacefully, and the current head elf explains it simply.
The Successes Clause states that you may step down once you've effectively completed your mission and chosen a proper successor.
Santas can retire. There's an official process. You find a replacement, you hand over the job, you leave with dignity, and your magical pension intact. If this clause existed in 1994, and it did because North Pole law is ancient, then why did the previous Santa have to stage a death on a roof? Why the theatrics? The answer gets worse when you factor in the Santa Claus 3. In that movie, we learn about the escape clause. A Santa can resign at any moment by holding their official snow globe and wishing it away. Instant retirement. No preparation needed. No successor required. Just grab the globe and peace out. Santa 17 knew about both options. The Successes Clause required finding and briefing a successor. Basically the normal retirement path. The escape clause required nothing but a snow globe he already owned. If he wanted to leave, he could have just resigned. He could have used the escape clause and vanished instantly. He could have worked with the council to implement the Successes Clause with proper transition planning. So why didn't he? Because both options require something the North Pole couldn't afford: informed consent from the successor. If Bernard had approached Scott at a company holiday party and said, "Hey, want to move to the Arctic permanently, gain 50 pounds, and deliver presents forever?" Scott would have laughed in his face. No sane person accepts that job when they understand what it actually entails. The weight gain alone would have been a deal breaker for someone as image conscious as 1994 Scott. A peaceful retirement under the Successes Clause requires a willing replacement, someone who agrees to the terms, signs the paperwork, understands the commitment. The Escape Clause would have let Santa 17 leave without forcing the coat onto anyone. But then, who runs Christmas? You can't just abandon the operation. They needed Scott to put on the coat before he understood what it means. They needed the transition to happen fast, in a moment of confusion and crisis, when a divorced dad was just trying to manage his kids' panic. A resignation requires negotiation. A death requires immediate action from whoever's on the scene. The staged fall was the only way to trigger the succession clause without Scott's informed consent. The theatrics weren't for drama, they were for a legal bypass. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Well, the 1994 incident was a false flag operation by the Council of Legendary Figures and the Elven High Command. They identified a strategic threat, declining belief due to technological advancement. They located the perfect candidate, a business executive with the skills to modernize Christmas. Then they executed a plan to acquire him before he could refuse. Scott Calvin didn't stumble into becoming Santa. He was acquired through magical entrapment. The suit, the card, the branded ladder, the calm reaction from the elves, every detail points to premeditation. The franchise's own canon confirms it. The previous Santa admits he didn't slip. The ethereal beings revealed they planned the human transition as an experiment. The Successes Clause and Escape Clause both prove that a peaceful, consensual retirement was always on the table. The whimsical Christmas movie we all grew up with tells the story of a corporate kidnapping, magical contracts of adhesion, and a man who lost his free will to save a holiday he didn't even believe in. But what do you think? Was this a necessary evil to save Christmas, or did they cross a line? Let me know what you think. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button, click like, and I'm currently working on a series of videos you can click here to watch on the show Pluribus. I've actually really enjoyed this series.